Alright, yo, we got some heat today. Let me take a seat. Alright, gang, so today we're gonna be talking about what is the best street photography camera, the best ultimate tool for making street photographs. Is it the Leica? Is it the Fuji? Let's find out. What's going on, YouTube? Welcome back to another KingJvpes video, man. It's good to see you back here. I haven't seen you in a while. I know you guys haven't been watching my other videos. I'm just kidding, you guys. Really quick, if you're new to this channel, man, consider hitting that subscribe button down below and dropping that notification bell so you guys can get reminded on my upcoming videos. But with that said, man, let's go ahead and just jump into it. What is the best ultimate street photography camera? That is a very subjective question because everybody has different needs, but today we're going to kind of cycle through some of the cameras that I own and talk a little bit about the pros and cons of them, and hopefully by the end of this video I can tell you guys which one I prefer out of the bunch. Here we go. These are the cameras that I use kind of on a constant basis, and the first one, folks, is a Leica. So this is the Leica M2 with a 35mm Summicron. I got this camera couple, maybe like year and a half, 2 years ago, and it's been serving me great. It's kind of like the daily driver when it comes to street photography. Now, here's the thing about Leica. It seems like every street photographer shoots some type of Leica, the M2, the M3, or the M6, for example. It's almost become super cliche that street photographers shoot with Leicas, and I get it, man. The Leica is a great tool for street photography. I understand that. But the thing is, I don't think that you need to have a Leica to shoot street photography. So if you're getting into it, you don't need a Leica first of all. But what I will say though is that these are exceptional tools and they are precision tools. Now, the thing that really strikes me about the Leica is the fact that, one, you have the hyperfocal scale here and it makes focusing super easy. And the second thing would be the silent shutter sound. So listen to this really quick. It just sounds really nice. So not only do you have a very quiet camera for the streets, so if you're going to go out and make some candid photographs, you're not going to be heard because you have a very quiet camera. And secondly, with the Summicron lens, and also there are other cheaper alternative lenses like the Voigtlander 35mm color scope are one of my favorite lenses for the M mount system, but they all have this hyperfocal scale on top. Shooting with a rangefinder lens gives you a different feel. One benefit is the fact that the focusing throw on these lenses are very short, whereas on, like, for example, the Canon F-1, to get from close focus all the way to infinity, you do have to turn the barrel of the lens a little bit more so. And maybe I should rephrase this by saying shooting with a rangefinder is very comfortable for doing street photography. You have the optical viewfinder, you can use zone focusing with the lens, you can focus quickly, precisely, and it's very quiet. So those are some of the benefits of shooting with a Leica, and we'll get to my final thoughts on the entire thing towards the end of the video. Now, since we brought the Canon F1 up already, let's go ahead and talk about this camera. Now, the F1 being an SLR camera, obviously it's not gonna be the same kind of rangefinder optical window. You are now looking directly at what you're gonna get in the photograph. So if you're out of focus, you're gonna see that, which could be a benefit for a lot of people because depending on your shooting style, you may wanna see what you have in focus. And that's one of the downfalls, as with the Leica, you don't get to see what you have in focus or what you don't. All you see is the rangefinder patch. So that's definitely one of the pluses to shooting with an SLR. Some of the downsides though, in contrast to the M2, is the shutter sound. I mean, it's not terribly loud, but it's definitely noticeable. This is one of the cameras that I get a bunch of looks at when I'm doing, like, you know, walking down Market Street in San Francisco type of thing. They can hear it. One thing that I do like about shooting with an SLR though is that most lenses, again, have the hyperfocal scale, so you can zone focus with that. But another one being that a lot of these SLR styled cameras have built-in auto exposure modes. So like aperture priority is something that I shoot with pretty much about 90% of the time when I'm not shooting Sunny 16 with the Leica, and it makes shooting really easy because you don't really have to worry about metering. All you got to worry about is your aperture and the relation in depth of field. But yeah, I mean, the SLRs are great cameras to shoot street photography with, and again, my final verdict is at the end of the video. The next camera, folks, would be the Fuji X-Pro2. Now, the X-Pro2 in a lot of ways is very similar to the Leica. So design-wise, they're very similar. You got an optical viewfinder here on the left side of the camera, and then you have your lens up front, but that's pretty much it. Shooting with something like the Fuji makes street photography really easy because you have the optical viewfinder, and then you also have the EVF if you want to see that. You get to see the results right away, which can be a good thing or a bad thing depending on, you know, if you chimp a lot at your photos. But truly, I think one benefit that the Fuji has over a lot of cameras in the street photography world is that Fuji almost designs these cameras to be street photography machines. The 23mm f2, which is 35mm equivalent, is an extremely sharp lens. I went out last week to the Golden Coast making some photographs with the 6.7, but I brought the X-Pro2 along, and I made 2 of my favorite photographs this year with the Fuji X-Pro2. The optical viewfinder is great. The fact that you have auto exposure aperture priority is an excellent thing for not having to meter each individual scene. And it's a very simple camera to operate. And the more simple the camera is, the more attention you can put out into the world to look for street scenes. And so shooting with something like a Fuji, even like the X-T2 or the X100 series cameras, they're all really good for street photography. And last but not least, folks, we have a pocket camera like the Ricoh GR2. Now, the benefit of the pocket cameras are the ability to, one, have a super small setup, look very inconspicuous as well, but these cameras are super quiet. Like the X70 is another good one. You also have the Ricoh GR3, the bigger brother. You have, what else? The Fuji XF10, I believe. All pocket cameras are going to be good for street photography. Now, the main benefit of owning one of these cameras is to be able to just slip it in your pocket and go. You don't really need to think, man. You can bring a couple of extra batteries and just stuff it in your pocket. It's not going to take a lot of room. And because the camera is so small, it makes it really easy to maneuver and get into places that you generally wouldn't put your camera into. And that can make for some really cool and unique perspectives in street photography if you want to change up the way your photographs look. This camera has easily become one of my favorite pieces of gear to use while I'm out photographing. And being that this has a 16 megapixel sensor as well as a built-in 28mm lens, it makes for kind of like this dream pocket camera for street photography. Now, it's really hard to kind of decide on what cameras are going to be better suited for you, but what I will say is, personally for me, out of all of the cameras that were up here, there are 2 cameras that I find very much easy to use, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about why. The first one, folks, is going to be the Leica M2. Now, the reason why this is kind of like my go-to daily driver for street photography is because I've gotten really used to shooting with a hyperfocal distance scale on top of the lens. And this transfers over into the Canon F1 as well, because it has that on the lens as well. But the main kind of idea behind this is that it's quiet, it's reliable, and I know where everything is. So it could also be a deal of comfort. You know, I'm very comfortable shooting with the Leica. And the second one, folks, would be something like this, the pocket camera Ricoh GR2. And the main reason for that is because there's a feature in here called snap focus, which pretty much allows you to have autofocus like regular. But if you see a scene that's within a hyperfocal distance, so it goes back to the shooting style, I can fully press the shutter button and it's going to snap the photograph and focus automatically within a specified area. And that pretty much is how I shoot the Leica. And so it really comes down to shooting style for me. The way I shoot the Leica is the way I shoot the Ricoh, and vice versa. The F1 is still a really good camera for street photography, but one disadvantage would be the focusing for me, hence why I like the other 2. And the Fuji, although focus is not an issue with this camera, I just got it, and I gotta say the autofocus works really great, but the manual focus on the other hand, because a lot of these Fuji lenses don't have the scale on top, I prefer a physical scale. A lot of these Fuji cameras are gonna have the hyperfocal scale within the EVF or the viewfinder, which is a little gimmicky, but at the same time can be really, really useful if you learn how to utilize it to your style. And so it really kind of comes down at the end of the day to your shooting style and what you look for in a camera. You can shoot the Canon F1 and be perfectly fine and happy with it and make some of the most beautiful images this world has ever seen. You can do that with the Leica, you can do it with the Ricoh, and you can even do it with your smartphone if you will. But the main kind of idea is to find a camera that wraps around on your shooting style, and you have to know what your shooting style is before you decide ultimately what your best tool is. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. What do you guys use for street photography? What is your ideal setup? Do you guys use the same lenses? Do you guys use the same focal lengths? What do you look for in a camera to match your style? But I'm gonna wrap it up here. As always, Minolta gang. Whew.